anyone and everyone. Welcome to Have You Heard About This Case? My name is Sam.
And my name is Kelly.
Today we are going to head down to Florida to discuss a case that is pretty well known and is really baffling, really frustrating. But before we get into it, what's our intro question?
So since we're traveling to Florida here, and you and I have had the fortunate benefit to travel abroad quite a bit, I think that you and I value being home just as much.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I just wanted to know, what your favorite thing to do is once you hit home.
Well, there's a lot of things. I've talked about it a lot. If you listen to our other episodes about growing up in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, and I love just kind of being up, it's not really in the solitude of northern Wisconsin, but it's just quieter, and having the ability to do things like go out on the boat and just spending an afternoon just slowly tooling around on the lakes and on the chain from lake to lake, and doing that sort of thing, or just taking a walk through the woods and down a path.
Yeah, through the woods. Oh, that sounds
Stuff
nice.
I can't do in Chicago.
Yeah, you can't do that. I mean, you can walk through Lincoln Park and think about how it used to be a cemetery.
Right? And see a few hundred people
that's
while you do so.
Yeah, that's not a forest walk. That's not like a nice, peaceful hike.
Yeah, not like we, up where I grew up, which is basically all across northern Wisconsin, really all kind of Wisconsin in general, is just like these little trails. And it's like usually they're run by the county, and they have like little maps, and so you just choose what length you want. They'll have like a half a mile, or 2 mile hike to go through. And just a nice stroll.
Good, because I'd be like, okay, am I following the right signs for the half a mile?
Yeah, they give you a lot of really good, easy way of doing it. And there's a handful like right by my parents' house. That's
really nice.
My sister has quite a few acres in her house, and so she has a few trails in her property that I could go through.
And I bet it's beautiful up there in the fall.
Oh, it's
with
stunning.
All the trees.
Yes, the fall color is
Beautiful.
incredible.
Yeah.
But how about you? What do you like to do?
Well, my favorite thing, as we all know, I repeated it often. I'm from Cleveland, and my family will not leave Cleveland. I did Ancestry.com, and they've been there 128 years. So they won't leave. And I have to go there to visit them. And my favorite thing is just... My parents recently moved, so I really want to see their new space. My mom loves decorating. I can't wait to see her, and I can't wait to see my dad, who is doing well with his treatment. And we're going to celebrate all the holidays that we've missed, like Mother's Day, Father's Day, my mom's birthday, all that stuff. And I still have friends up there, and I can't wait to see they got a house in a beautiful area of Cleveland. So
nice.
I want to see their new house, and they have a big backyard for the dogs. And I'm going to meet her new man and question him appropriately.
As a best friend, you kind of have to.
I have to. And that's just sort of what I like the most. I like to spend even an extra day there so I have time just to chill on the couch, and then around 1 p.m. take a nap, because my parents are like, it's nap time.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, it's always so good to just go in. Usually one of the first things that we always do is I go to my parents' house, and we sit in the backyard, or if it's cold, in the living room, and just hang out with the dogs. Simple as that. Just hang out with the dogs.
Yeah, my parents have one, and they want me to bring Arthur, which means I have to drive.
Luckily, it's not like a crazy long drive. It's long,
it's
but
not
like
it's not that bad.
days.
You jump onto the highway and you basically just go straight. And the thing that really pisses me off is just that Indiana's really in my way.
Yeah, there's not much going on those highways in Indiana.
If we could do something about Indiana, I would be happy. They keep talking about the hypertube between Chicago and Cleveland. I'm waiting, and I haven't heard anything.
That's one really good thing about my route that I take. Well, numerous routes, actually. Kind of depends on how I'm feeling and what I have planned. I have a lot of friends who live in between me and my parents. So there's a lot of times I'll like plan where it's like, hey, do you just want to catch dinner on my way through town or lunch or whatever? And I love being able to do that because it otherwise I might not see my friends terribly frequently. So that's always a nice little perk.
The visiting is just my favorite part. And I also have to shout out that I'm going to see my little brother and his wife. So that's like another reason I want to spend more time there because they just got a new dog and they're wonderful. They rehabilitate dogs that are known to be biting animals, aggressive, and they help save them. And my sister-in-law has a service dog, and it's been beautiful because every time my dad's been in the hospital, Tesla, the service dog, he's allowed in and he can be with my dad.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I'm going to see Pat. He just completed a triathlon.
Oh, wow.
And he's on his second hip. He was born with a dislocated hip. And he's had so many surgeries, and he just finished a triathlon.
That's impressive.
And then he asked me if he asked me if I would run one with him, and I was like, Patrick, I would start puking like one of those kids from Made on MTV in the first 30 seconds.
What a reference.
Right? Remember, though, they always had the trash can ready, like, for when you barf, not if you barf?
Yeah, I forgot about that show. Wow.
I didn't. I think about that so much. Like, probably as much as men think about the Roman Empire.
Well, should we get into today's case? Because this is a big one. There's a lot of things to go through.
Okay, and you've already told me off air that I'm going to be frustrated, and I'm ready to be in that space.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in this case where it's just like, everything seemed to really work in favor of the suspect in a very frustrating way. So today we're going to talk about the disappearance of Jennifer Kesse. And this is one of the cases when I first started to get into like true crime podcasts and YouTube. This is one of the first cases I ever heard about with that. And it's literally been in my head for years. So I'm glad that we're finally covering it, but there's going to be a lot of different like pictures and things that we're going to reference. So I strongly recommend you guys check out our Instagram and kind of see what I'm talking about in here, because we have some maps, we have some photos. That's all really important to this case. So it'll be on Instagram, it'll be on TikTok, it'll be on YouTube Shorts, kind of whatever platform you prefer to check it out.
Yeah.
Jennifer Joyce Kesse was born on May 20th, 1981 to parents Joyce and Drew Kesse in New Jersey. And as a kid, Joyce and Drew decided to move the whole family down to Tampa, Florida. And by this time, Jen had a younger brother named Logan, and the family of four were incredibly close. Her parents would say that she was a very responsible child, and we'll see examples of this within her adult life, kind of as we continue here. And they say that she was very smart. She always had good grades, and she always had this large friend group. She just was that personality that people really enjoyed being around.
That we see so much because people want to take them from their communities. Yeah. Oh, this close family of four just hits me in the heart because I'm a family of four, too.
Me too.
You are, too. Yeah, I was going to say.
But after graduating high school, Jen would attend the University of Central Florida in Orlando, and she would graduate in 2003 with a degree in finance.
Good for her.
And she was highly sought after by multiple employers after college.
Yeah.
And she would decide to work for the Central Florida Investments timeshare company, which was just outside of Orlando. And this was exciting for her. Obviously, being sought after college is huge. But she also was family friends with some people who worked there as well. And so she just felt very comfortable entering her career in this company. And it was a great position for her. And it was great entry-level income. And at age 24, she was promoted multiple times within that first year and ended up in a manager position. She was very talented at what she did. She ended up saving the company thousands and thousands of dollars by just reviewing their finances and figuring out better ways that they can function at such a young age. And she would actually become the youngest person in the company that would be promoted to manager. Like, huge accomplishments.
Yeah.
And within those first couple years, Jen would actually buy her first condo in Orlando. And this condo was in a complex called Mosaic at Millennia. And this was a really well-traveled area. The road was one of kind of the main thoroughfares in the area. And it was right across from a mall, which was also kind of up and coming. And Mosaic at Millennia was previously apartments. And they were in the process of being converted into condos. And Jen was one of the first people to actually purchase a condo.
Good for her.
And the units were in the process of being renovated. So in the transition between apartments to condos, they were trying to upgrade the units and make them even better so that they could increase the value.
Yeah.
And there were even some buildings in this complex, like it was quite large, that were being newly built as well. So there's a ton of different things happening right where she's living. And
okay, so that reads to me there's a lot of people around, well-traveled.
Well, yeah, we'll kind of get, because this apartment complex is going to be very important to our story.
I feel that.
And there were some other tenants that were living across the many different buildings at Mosaic and Millennia, but many of the units were empty and under construction due to this transition.
Okay.
And Jen would actually only have one neighbor that was living on her floor. The rest of the units were currently being worked on.
Okay. All right.
And
that's
the surrounding area with that mall, like, it wasn't great, but it was very clearly up and coming. Like, that mall was fairly new. They were trying to really make this area be very popular, and even the apartment advertised itself as having 24-hour security and that it was going to be a great new place, a new neighborhood.
But when Jen was there, they're still in construction, so there's no 24-hour security, correct?
There is security. We'll get through all of this. There's there's a lot to this. We're going to talk a lot about Mosaic at Millennia throughout this whole episode. But it was advertised as a gated community with security. Like, it actually had gates to enter.
Yeah.
But because of the construction, it was kind of always open because of the large number of outside workers that needed access on a daily basis and be able to go into different buildings. So that's where it's like, yes, technically it was gated. Technically it had security.
Okay.
But at this given time, it was kind of always open.
Yeah.
And Jen was a very cautious person. She had a strict routine, and she was the type of person that kind of had everything prepared, such as like picking out her outfit to wear at work the next day. Like, she kind of always followed the same routine throughout her days. And even like things were like, she's coming home from work, she'd always talk to somebody on the phone, and it would be typically be her parents or her boyfriend. And if she didn't, she'd like give them a text or something saying, hey, I made it home, like that sort of thing. That was in her daily routine to do that sort of stuff.
Good. I love that. I love that because it's so good to be on the phone when you're traveling, but also to be aware. It's always nice to send whoever you were with, like, that you arrived home safe. Because it's just, you know, it's a pick-me-up that you're okay.
Yeah, and even, like, she'd have different people from the maintenance crew come into her unit because there were a handful of things that when she purchased the condo, she said she wanted fixed. And the management agreed to that. And so there would be maintenance workers coming into her unit, and she'd always make sure that she'd have somebody either kind of on call that she can easily call, and they know that, like, to expect a call, or she just immediately got on the phone with somebody while a stranger was in her apartment.
Yes.
And
yes. Completely understood.
Yeah, she had a handful of different things that needed to be addressed after moving in. Very simple things. Some things were like paint, like little things. And like, I know I've done this when I got my apartment I'm currently in. I requested a ton of stuff, actually. I requested a new stove. I requested new blinds. I requested new paint. And they did all of that. And that's common.
Yeah, hey, I was going to say, you're paying rent there. They got to do that stuff technically when somebody moves. And if I were purchasing a condo, something that probably has a large down payment and is a serious commitment, I would have requests too that I would like get a contract signed, like that you're going to give me a new fridge or whatever it is.
Yeah, and this was such a big deal for Jen because she actually paid for this condo completely on her own. She didn't have a co-signer, anything like that. Like, this was very important to her, that this was her first kind of huge step into the adult world beyond her career.
Yeah.
And Jen also made it pretty clear that she didn't feel very comfortable with a lot of the maintenance and construction workers. And she had noticed a couple times that they would speak Spanish to each other and talk about her. And she knew some Spanish. So she actually was like knew what was happening. And unfortunately, I don't know exactly what they said, but she had told a couple separate people that she felt pretty uncomfortable around them.
I understand that.
With her being such kind of a cautious person, a lot of it stemmed from, which her mom kind of reflects on, is that she was a huge fan of Law and Order, and she would try to find like safety lessons in each episode that she'd adapt into her everyday life. And this was something her and her mom had in common. They both loved watching Law and Order together.
Oh my God, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, and at one point, I don't know when this happened, but her parents were actually held up at gunpoint. And this definitely influenced how she protected herself in the future. And this is kind of part of why she was always keeping in contact with people, making sure that people knew where she was and that she made it home safely. And her and Joyce would like talk about different sorts of scenarios and how to get out of them. And there's one in specific that Joyce would discuss fairly frequently in interviews and everything after this happened, saying that if Jen was ever carjacked and forced to drive, she would deliberately crash her car in the hopes that she'd be better prepared by wearing a seatbelt and then have the ability to get away. And like they had this plan for these sorts of scenarios.
That's definitely a plan. I don't know. I think this is so common among women and passing down, especially from mother to daughter. of how to protect yourself in these scenarios because self-defense classes have become so exorbitant. And I, like, you know, the only thing I've learned is if somebody tries to mug me, I'm throwing my purse the other way and I'm running.
Well, it's one of those things, and it's not exclusive to women, but I think that more commonly it's in the back of our head. But it's like in any scenario, even just walking down the street, me walking between the parking lot where my car is and my building, which is not far, I'm thinking about like, okay, if someone comes up behind me, like in every day.
Right.
Like that's just how our brains, we've been trained to think in that sort of what if scenario anytime we're out in public.
Yeah, and I think it's been proven now that it doesn't really work as well, but I still, if I'm walking anywhere in the dark at night, I carry my keys in between my fingers.
Oh, I have my keys set up on like a little, it's not quite a lanyard, it's something a little smaller, but where it like essentially turns into a mace, where it's like I have my ball of keys and I can swing it around. That's all.
That's true.
I have it like that for defense purposes. I purposely did that.
That's a good idea. I was gonna say, you could nail him. And
so you've seen how many keys I have on my keychain.
You do.
Like that would hurt.
It would hurt. He would probably fall down, at least like take a knee.
And I have really long arms, so I have a great wingspan to fly that thing around. So.
It's true. You're so much taller. You guys don't see us in person, but Sam is so much taller than I am.
Yeah, I'm definitely on the tall side. But Jen, she had a boyfriend named Rob Allen, and Rob lived about 3 hours away in Fort Lauderdale. And even though they lived hours away from each other, they never actually lived in the same town. They really made their relationship work. And they spent nearly every weekend together, whether it was she would travel down to Fort Lauderdale or he would travel up to Orlando. They really tried to spend as much time together as they could while balancing out their travel.
Yeah. That's great.
And they had been dating for about a year. And just days after she disappeared, days before she had disappeared, she had actually gone on vacation with him to St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Oh,
and
that's, I mean, cool, big deal.
Yeah, they had friends who had a house there, and they were able to go stay at this house and just have a really great, it was like a 3 or 4 day trip down to St. Croix.
Yeah.
And which from there it's probably like a couple hour flight, if that, because it's not far, but it's a whole different world than Florida, which had to be amazing.
Yeah.
And Jen returned home to Orlando on Monday, January 23rd, 2006, and she went straight to work that morning. So she actually landed in, I believe it was Miami, because their flights got all messed up and they had to fly into Miami instead of Fort Lauderdale. And then they drove from Miami up to Fort Lauderdale. And she actually just spent the night at Rob's place and then woke up super early in the morning to make the 3-hour drive to Orlando and just went straight to work.
Wow. She's I mean, all about it. Business.
She is.
I like her.
And on her way, I believe it was home that day. There's some different reports whether it was in the morning on her way into work or if it was after work on her way home. Either way, she called her mom and just talked about St. Croix and shared the details of her trip. And her mom said that she was essentially on cloud 9 after the trip. She said that she really enjoyed it. It was great spending time with Rob and going on this little vacation. And her day really was pretty normal. Around 10 p.m., Jen had actually called Rob, which they talked daily. This was kind of their normal time frame to call. And
Okay,
they
yeah.
did, unfortunately, end up having an argument that evening.
Oh, no.
And what I understand is that they both were kind of upset over the same exact thing, that neither of them wanted to be long distance. They wanted more commitment to each other and not have to constantly travel, but neither of them wanted to move. So it was kind of like an argument of like, I love you, I want to be near you, but like, I have a good thing going here, and he's kind of in the same boat.
I've got a great job that I was promoted at. I have a condo here. I wouldn't leave if I were her.
Yeah, and he was in the same exact position in Fort Lauderdale. So like it was an argument, but it also like it's not something super serious in the way of like an argument could be.
Mm-hmm.
And while Rob and Jen were in St. Croix, Jen let her brother Logan and a couple of his friends crash at her condo.
Okay.
Logan had lived in Tampa with her parents at that point. Mm-hmm. And so traveling to Orlando, I think it's a couple hours between the two cities with his friends. I don't know if it was for an event or if he just kind of wanted out of the parents' house for a weekend. But
yeah.
Jen had no issue letting him stay with a couple of his friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one of the guys that Logan brought was a good friend named Matt. And Matt and Jen had actually previously dated. Seems like they were still on very good terms. Didn't impact Logan and Matt's friendship. But just something to kind of take note.
And I was going to say, interesting.
Another friend.
As we say.
Yeah, another friend of his was Travis. And Travis had accidentally left his work cell phone behind. It sounds like he had just gotten it, like right before this weekend trip. And I don't know if he just forgot he had it and accidentally left it behind or what happened. But it was an accident either way. And Logan asked if it was possible for Jen to find it and mail it back. So
I mean, you love your brother, but it's like, ugh.
Well, she had like FedEx and UPS right by work, if not like in her same building. So it wasn't a huge task for her to do, and she didn't really have an issue with it. She told Logan that on that Tuesday morning, she'll make sure that it gets mailed out. Mm-hmm. So Tuesday morning comes around, and Jen didn't show up for work. And as I mentioned, Jen is very routine oriented. And she would typically leave her condo between 7:30, 7:45 a.m. It's a 12-mile drive to work. And so that would typically put her to work at 8 or a little bit before. And also,
sounds like her.
Yeah, like every single day, that's how she did it. And typically on the way to work, she would call Rob. And that morning, he didn't receive a call or a text, which was definitely out of the ordinary. But he was also kind of attributing the fact that they had this little argument the night before, that maybe she just needed a little bit of time and he'll try to call her later. Mm-hmm. Even though he felt like this was out of character.
Yeah.
And
I understand what he's thinking, but I hate what's happening.
Well, later that morning, she actually had an 11 a.m. meeting. And her boss was very concerned when she didn't show up at work at the normal time. And then the fact that she didn't show up for the meeting, he became incredibly concerned. So he actually, being friends of the family, called her parents, being like, I know this is out of character. Like, something seems up here. Like, is everything okay? Do you know what's going on? Type of thing.
Yeah.
And they knew nothing.
Good boss. Yeah.
So everyone now at this point is trying to call Jen's cell phone and her landline, because this is 2006. Like, she still has a landline in her condo. And they only just got her voicemail. So Joyce and Drew get a hold of the property manager at the complex where Jen had her condo, and the manager informed her parents that, like, the car isn't in her normal parking spot, and that they don't see it anywhere else on the property. And he even was able to get into Jen's condo. They had to wait a little bit to have that happen due to like procedural and they can't just have anyone walking into somebody's private property. But
right, I'm sure they had to prove like were her parents, she may be missing, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But he was able to get in at some point. He like just a quick glance. He's like, doesn't seem like anything's wrong.
Okay.
And at this point, Joyce and Drew started to drive from Tampa to Orlando. And it's about an hour and a half. Okay. So it's not a super long drive, but not short when you're worried.
Yes. And yeah.
Logan would also drive separately with his friend Travis, the one who lost the phone. And I'm not sure if Joyce and Drew had keys to her condo, but we know that Logan did because he just stayed there a couple days ago.
Yeah.
While on the road, Joyce actually called Rob as well because he's her boyfriend. Maybe he knows something. And
right, what have you heard?
Yeah, unfortunately, he didn't have any information. He mentioned, like, I didn't get my normal call or text, and that felt weird.
Oh, man.
And then she started calling a ton of Jen's friends, but no one knew anything.
And I was upset and nervous already when they said they saw her apartment and it didn't look like anything was wrong. I'm like, oh.
We'll get into like what the apartment looked like because they're about to, the family is about to enter. So they have some descriptions of what was actually inside the apartment. But really things did look quite normal.
And they know her, so they know what her home would look like.
Exactly. So Logan and Travis were actually the first to arrive at Jen's condo. And they decided to wait for Joyce and Drew before entering the unit because they weren't terribly far behind. And they started just to like go down the halls and knock on people's doors just to see like if anyone saw anything. And they actually did discover at one point that the unit directly across the hall from her was open and people were working on it because everything's under construction. So they did kind of like peek their head in there, but unfortunately didn't really give them any answers. But so many of these other units are empty. There was only one other person living on her floor.
Yeah.
So they go outside. They see a few maintenance workers and construction workers sitting inside of a white van in the parking lot. So he goes up and approaches the van to ask them if he had seen her. And all of the men in the van ignored him. Like, he's standing at the window in front of them, and they wouldn't even look in his direction.
Well, okay. I mean, he's right there. He's asking you a question.
Yeah.
Even if you are bilingual, you could say like, no English bad.
Well, I will say, I think a lot of the people working there only spoke Spanish. But you're right. Like, they could say, like, kind of even just give a gesture, like, I don't know what you're talking about. But they wouldn't even look in his direction.
That is so weird because he's right there at the car. Also, what a brave brother to just go start knocking on doors and finding whoever he can. And he's getting completely ignored. That is so weird.
So once their parents also arrived at Jen's condo, they went inside and they again noticed nothing odd. There was mail from when Jen and Rob were in St. Croix inside of her unit. So clearly she was home at some point, was able to grab her mail.
Yeah.
Her bed wasn't made. And there were a couple sets of clothes that were all in kind of brown tones sitting on her bed as if she was trying to pick out her outfit with a specific color palette. And Joyce talks about this because apparently Jen had a new pair of Nine West alligator skin high heels that she was very excited about. And those were not inside her apartment. So all of these clothes that were laid out on the bed seemed to match the color palette of those heels. So, like, it makes sense where it's like, okay, she picked her outfit to match her heels. She took them with her. Like, it was as if her day just started like any other day. And, well, Jen's luggage, like, from her St. Croix trip was in the apartment. It wasn't unpacked. Like, she had just kind of set it down the day before.
I don't blame her. She went right to work.
Well, this is the day after. So she went right to work and then came home that night, the Monday, and she would have brought in her luggage. She would have brought in the mail. She just hadn't gotten around to actually taking care of it yet.
Been there.
And on the counter in the kitchen was a small bottle attached to a key ring that was pepper spray. And Jen typically always carried this, but she was just on a plane. So her family thinks that she would have taken it off because it would have been confiscated at the airport. And she just hadn't gotten it back onto her keychain yet.
Yeah.
In her bathroom, Jen's glasses were on the vanity counter. Her contacts weren't in her case, so seems like she put on her contacts.
Again, like a normal morning, like she put in her contacts.
Yeah, the corners of the shower were even wet, you know, like where it can kind of build up a little extra puddle of water. So it was like, it looked like she showered in the morning and there was a wet towel in the laundry room. So it's like everything here, like this is just super normal, everything.
Yeah.
And the only thing that...
It sounds,
The only thing that was noticeable that wasn't in her apartment, which again is still going to be a pretty normal thing, was her purse, her keys, her phone, her briefcase, and Travis's phone. Like the things that you would expect her to take.
Yeah, it's almost like she left for work and intended to mail this phone to Travis.
Exactly. And even the door was locked as normal. The type of lock that she had on her door could only be locked from the exterior. So she had to be in the hallway to lock it, not inside the condo. So, like, someone clearly, whether it was her or somebody else, we have absolutely no idea, would have exited the unit and physically locked it before leaving the premises.
Right.
So now we're at about 3 p.m. on that Tuesday. The Kesses call the police to report her missing. It didn't look like the police gave them any pushback, but they did advise, like, come back in a couple hours if she doesn't return. Like, it's still pretty early, but, like, we understand. Like, come back in a couple hours.
Right. Because she missed her meeting at 11 a.m., and they probably didn't get there for a little bit yet. So maybe, it was just still too early. Exactly.
CBS article mentions that the report was officially filed that evening. So they did get it within that same day.
Yeah.
And
later than they hoped, I think.
Well, this family took action. They absolutely took action. Between the initial contact with the police and then filing the report a couple hours later, the Kesse family and many of Jen's friends, including the majority of her sorority sisters from when she was in college, they gathered outside her condo and immediately started handing out flyers and going along kind of that busy road that she lived off of by that mall. And would be out there during rush hour handing out flyers, just saying, like, you guys are traveling through this area probably every day in rush hour. Yeah. You would have seen her. Like,
oh my goodness. What good friends and family. They're like right away, like, we're going to make flyers. We don't have time to wait for this. We're going to hand them out.
Exactly.
That's so good. Yeah.
Unfortunately, they didn't learn any information from this, but it was great that they immediately started handing out these flyers and making people in the area aware.
Right.
And once the missing persons report was officially filed, investigators started to question Jen's friends and family, because obviously you got to rule them out.
Right.
And
right.
This definitely includes Rob. Police quickly were able to rule him out because he was in Fort Lauderdale. along
I
with
was gonna
all of
say,
other Jen's family and friends. Like, everyone very quickly was like checked off the list as not involved. So 2 days later was the first new information that the Kesses were able to receive from law enforcement. On January 26th, the call came into law enforcement from an apartment complex named Huntington on the Green. And this was somebody who actually saw all the flyers and like saw her disappearance on the news. And they had seen this car in the parking lot that was in a visitor spot that hadn't been moved in a couple days. And this was Jen's car. Huntington on the Green is only about 1 mile from Jen's Mosaic at Millennia condo. And you can see here in my script you can see the map. It's super close.
I'm looking at the map. It's a 5-minute drive.
Yes.
1.2 miles. Like, that's
it's very close.
I mean, I'm really glad that those flyers made him realize the car was there, but that's very scary. It must be so scary for the family, for them to just find her car.
But Jen's car was found on a side parking lot that was near the complex's pool. And this was, as I mentioned, a visitor spot. So obviously the first fear is that Jen might be found deceased in the car. And at this point, Rob has also traveled over to Orlando, and I believe he was on site when investigators were going to this car. I could be slightly wrong about that. I saw a couple places mention it, and some just never said that he was there. But the couple that had mentioned it said that he was kind of held back a little bit. Not like he was like trying to like break through, but like, you stay over here while we check it out. And part of the reason that they were doing that was he was still like in view of it, was so that they could gauge his reaction when they start opening up the car.
Okay. Smart.
Yeah, like it doesn't seem like it was this like super like he's trying to like break through and very emotional. Like he was wanting to figure out what happened and wanting to be there to just get answers.
Because he's already been cleared. I mean, it's smart that they're trying to do this, but the most likely reason he was there is hopefully to find information about Jen.
Exactly, and they all believed that. But this was just kind of a good opportunity to get a sense and like get a visual kind of impression from him.
Yeah, I completely get that.
Unfortunately, very little evidence was gathered from her car. There was a partial palm print that was identified as Jen's, and a partial DNA sample that was too small to be tested or identified. There were 2 pairs of flip-flops that were believed to be Jen's. And this was because her parents explained that she didn't like driving in heels, so she always kept an extra pair of shoes in her car so that she could just switch them out. And there was also in the backseat a DVD player that was a gift from Rob. And this gave investigators like the impression of like, this isn't a robbery if they just left that behind.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, well, there's no way it was a robbery then. They just left a DVD player.
And Jen was not in the car. Like, they were really scared when they opened the trunk. Like, this kind of felt like, oh goodness, now I'm blanking on it. I was thinking of it earlier today. A case that we covered, opening the trunk. Oh my goodness.
I feel like we've covered a lot of cases where they have to open the trunk.
And
it's never good. I imagine.
I'm totally blanking on it. Yeah, no, I was literally thinking about this today because I'm like, oh, I should write this in the script so I don't forget. And then I didn't have the time to go write it in there.
Yeah.
I want to say Kiera Coles, but I could be wrong because I know they found her car. But regardless, like she wasn't in there. And the car overall was pretty neat. And that's something that kind of set off some red flags because according to her parents, she kept her apartment very clean, but she let her car get a little more messy.
Okay.
So, but
Understood.
it it also could easily be the situation where it's like she could have recently cleaned her car and just hadn't gotten messy yet, because nothing was odd about it, other than the fact that it was a little cleaner than normal. But there was still stuff there, like.
Yeah, maybe she cleaned it because she had the new DVD player from Rob. She had 2 pairs of flip-flops. She had her brand new heels. You know, maybe
the heels were not in the car, but
the heels,
the flip-flops were. That's just her mom explained that she kept flip-flops for that reason. But I do take note the heels were not in the car, 'cause that we can kind of bring that back up later. So over the years, when I've been keeping an eye on this case, I remember hearing a couple other podcasts discuss that locals say that where her car was found at Huntington on the Green was a bad area of Orlando. Oh. And with it only being 1 mile from Jen's condo, which was advertised to be a great and safe area, I wanted to kind of look into this a little bit more and look at some demographics of things and crime statistics. And according to apartmentratings.com, Huntington on the Green has a 2.5 out of 5 rating. So very much middle of the road. And a lot of the reviews are really
not awesome.
Exactly. A lot of the reviews are from the last 10 years or so. So I dug to get some that went back to the mid 2000s. And they were pretty mixed at that point, which makes sense with the kind of 2.5 rating. Some were 5 stars, some were like 1 star. And some people really said it was fantastic living there and that they had no issues, while others called out the management company for being money hungry, saying that they were raising rent without updating current problem units. And like that was the majority of the complaints from people. I was hoping to like find things about like being an unsafe neighborhood, but everything was in relation to the management company.
Damn it. It's like, I wish I could hear about the neighborhood, but they're like, they keep raising the rent. And I'm like, I know y'all, but what happened? Did you see anything?
Well, I kept digging. So I went to crimegrade.org and they had a color-coded map that had kind of like overall violent crimes, and then they broke them down into categories. And one of the categories was kidnapping. And that's the situation that we're in. We have no clue where Jen is. And so it's like, could that have happened? And so the area where Huntington on the Green is, along with the area where Jen's condo was, are both red, signifying a higher rate of crime. So I found that really interesting that both of the areas are kind of in the same kind of category of crime, according to this website.
Was it crime in general that was high, or was it specifically like kidnapping?
Both were in the red.
Oh.
Yeah. And some people describe the area around Jen's condo as being up and coming and developing into a great community along a well-traveled road across the street from the mall, and advertised as security and a gated community at Mosaic at Millennia. And even on their current website, and so this is 17 years later, like obviously I don't know what the website said in 2006, but, or I guess 18 years later. But it says on their homepage, quote, Mosaic at Millennia offers true carefree living with 24-hour security. Residents feel completely safe. And that's like their main blurb on their homepage. And, well...
I don't know if you should speak for all your tenants that way.
Well, also, like, it is really important to note, this is almost 2 decades later. And who knows what the security looks like nowadays. I'm so far from Florida. I can't figure that out.
And now that the units are occupied, like it may be quite different.
It looks beautiful. I will say that I've seen so many photos of it. It looks gorgeous. But let's get back to Jen's car, because that just kind of gives you a general sense of the area.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned, there wasn't a ton of evidence on the car itself, but since the car had been parked next to the pool, there was a camera at the pool.
Oh.
And this camera caught somebody sitting in Jen's car and exiting. And the issue is this camera took stills. It wasn't a video camera. It was just every few seconds it snapped a photo. Miraculously, this person, and incredibly disappointing to investigators and Jen's family, in each image, this person's face was perfectly obstructed by the posts of the fence.
Oh.
And I have the pictures for you in our script here. Why don't you take a glance at them?
Okay, I didn't roll down like you told me to. Oh, yeah, totally blocked. White t-shirt, white guy. Again, yeah, he moves all the way across that gate where the big bars are, and his face is just behind that big bar again, too.
It's like the perfect lineup, and it's incredible, and it's so frustrating that it happened like this.
It's completely frustrating, and also incredibly lucky for him, which sucks. And
yeah. So as Kelly mentioned, there's two large posts on either side of a gate to enter the pool. And the two images that we have, at least the ones that are released publicly, I don't know if I think there are more, but I don't think they help. Because it's also a very grainy image.
Yeah. It's clearly an older surveillance image.
But this person, like the two photos that we have is as he walks by the thicker post on the other side of the gate, and the second one is on the second side of the gate, that thicker post as well. And like, I think even if it wasn't lined up exactly like this, it still might be incredibly hard to see their face because they're so grainy. It would still be really hard to identify them.
Yeah, because also, like, this guy, from what I'm seeing in picture number 1, and it's a little far away.
Yeah, it's on the other side of the pool.
It looks like this guy isn't even wearing a mask.
No, I don't think they are.
Anything.
No, I definitely don't think they are.
I don't think he thought he needed it because he thought these would be all grainy and they couldn't see him. But it's so horrifying.
Or he just didn't even think of cameras. But in these photos, it appears that they're wearing all white with black shoes. A lot of people describe it as painter coveralls. And like I said, it's super grainy. It's really hard to tell. We can't even tell if this is a man or a woman. We keep saying he,
Not really.
but we truly don't know.
Yeah.
Which, again, going back to another case we covered, feels like it's Missy Beavers all over again. And the tragedy of her murder and not even knowing the gender of the suspect.
Yeah, because with these images, I use the term he reflexively, should use the term they, because the figure or the person cuts could be either.
Exactly. And there's a ton of debate regarding the color of the clothing. The security footage is in black and white. And experts say that the color shading is not accurate. And they may not actually be wearing white. And a blog that goes by Crime Squid had a really great post on a theory about the clothing colors. And I believe that there's a good possibility that this camera records in night vision, which drastically changes colors on some clothing items depending on the material. And so right below here, Kelly, I have a couple images that they posted on their blog, which we'll link as well because they have a fantastic explanation of surveillance footage from a burglary that also was recorded in night vision cameras. And the clothing looks pretty similar to the images in Jen's case. They look like they're wearing all light colors, potentially white or khaki. And then there's a second shot of the same exact person from a full color camera. And it turns out this guy's actually wearing red pants and a pink shirt. And
okay.
yeah, so it's like in the way that the light is just even in that first photo, again, these are all going to be in our social media so that you can see what I'm referring to. But it looks very similar to the images.
I'm going to roll down.
Yeah, you'll see the two photos.
Yeah, wow. Wow. It looks completely different.
So
Like,
we can't
drastically
rely on the fact that they're wearing white at all. We can't guarantee that that's what it was. And experts in this case are saying that you also can't rely on these colors.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. So unfortunately, that throws another major wrench into this case.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there was no movement in the case for years. Nearly 3 years after Jen disappeared, the lead detective, Joel Wright, decided that he basically wanted to start the investigation over. He wanted to re-interview everyone he could and reanalyze all of the evidence. And
Go Officer Wright.
during one of these interviews, he with a housekeeper from Mosaic at Millennia, he showed her the surveillance photos. And she said she actually believed that she might know who is in those photos. And she called him Chino. And he was another worker at Mosaic at Millennia. He was one of the maintenance construction guys. And she believed it was him based on the little tiny bit of hair that we can maybe see, along with kind of his stance while he's walking and the clothing that he was wearing.
Okay. So, kind of, it's good. It's something.
It's something.
But it might be nothing. It's something. It might be nothing because, like you said, we can only see a little bit of his hair in these pictures.
Another
and the clothing is questionable.
Yeah, another big thing
walk.
I forgot to put in here, and I wish I did. I let me see if I can Google it really quick as we're chatting. But this person is supposed to be on the shorter side, and
right. I can see that in the surveillance photos.
Yeah, like quite a bit shorter, like maybe like 5'2", 5'3". So let me pull that up.
Exactly.
I completely forgot to add it to my script.
Because that's my height, and you can see that the gates are much taller than this person walking by. Yeah,
so there's a lot of speculation on the height, and which is something we saw in the Missy Beavers case as well. There's some people that say as tall as 5'8", but it looks like the majority of sources I'm reading here, like I'm looking at Fox 13 in Tampa Bay, it says the FBI estimates this person is between 5'3" and 5'5".
Okay, and I'm just gonna say, living my life as a 5'1" woman, this character does look like he cuts a shorter figure.
They said it says in this article that he also, or just this person, we don't know if it's a male or female, has notably large feet for their height.
Yeah.
Which I think leads people to believe more of a man.
Yeah, you can see the shoe very clearly in both images.
Yes.
And I did notice that when I first looked at it. I was like, that's quite a large black shoe.
So Detective Wright, he had interviewed many people from Mosaic at Millennia throughout these 3 years, but he had not heard of Chino before. So during his first round of interviews, when she disappeared, Detective Wright discovered that there were actually many construction and maintenance workers who were in the United States illegally. And in turn, they're unable to work legally.
And probably much more difficult to track down.
Yes. And he also discovered that many of them were allowed to live in the vacant units that they worked in. And Chino was one of these people. He actually was living in a different building in the complex. And Chino was also one of the workers who was assigned to do the repair requests in Jen's unit.
I don't like it that they're living there, and also it's always terrible to have strangers in your apartment, and this is why.
I even got an email today from my apartment management about allowing people in the unit for maintenance and how we need to give very explicit permission, and if we don't give it, they won't do it. And I'm just like, thank you. I like that.
Good. Yes.
But potentially the most baffling piece of this involving Chino was that Wright had actually discovered that an anonymous tip had come in the first week after Jen disappeared, suggesting that the police look into Chino.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. The first week.
Yes.
Yeah.
So somehow this tip didn't get forwarded because Detective Wright also wasn't the first detective on Jen's case. It was handed off to him within the first 6 months or so. So he took it over very quickly. He's almost been there from the beginning, but in that first week he was not lead detective. So somehow this ended up getting past him, whether it just wasn't given to him or it was buried in some other paperwork. I don't know.
Right. Right.
But he began to look for Chino, and he wanted to obviously talk to him. And he discovered that he was currently serving time in prison for statutory rape. So Detective Wright went to go in.
Is he does he have an ankle monitor?
No, he's in prison.
He is in prison.
He's serving time.
So he's not in. Wow. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So he goes to the prison.
I don't like this guy at all.
He interviews Chino, and he's really asking kind of lead up questions and talking about the work that he did in Jen's apartment that he was hired to do by Mosaic at Millennia. And he says that Jen actually left him alone in the condo to finish up the job. And that once he was done, he left and everything was fine and normal. And he had no idea what happened to Jen. And this is a bit weird because, as we know, Jen was very particular about when people came into her apartment, she had people on call or she was on the phone with them. And even at one point, she was on the phone with her dad when these people were working in the condo and they needed to paint something, but she had to leave to go to work. And she was talking with her dad saying I don't know what to do. I don't want to leave, but I need this to be done. And they're here to do it right now. And her dad's just send him away and I'll come visit you and I'll do the painting myself. And so it's weird that he would say this.
And it pinged for me, that she left him alone in the condo to finish up the job. That does not sound like the Jen we have been hearing about.
Yeah, and so Detective Wright asks Chino to do a polygraph, which he willingly did, and he passed with no concern. There wasn't things that were inconclusive. It really did seem like he was telling the truth. And other than the grainy surveillance footage and this anonymous tip, there's nothing to tie Chino to this crime.
Yeah, they have nothing. I hate it. I hate it, but they have nothing.
So another year goes by, and Detective Wright retires, so it gets handed off to a new detective. And in 2016, the Kesse family had Jen legally declared deceased. So it's 13 years later, and they felt the need to do that at that point. And with this lack of additional movement in the case, I believe this is around the late 2010s. I couldn't find a specific year, but Drew and Joyce hire a private investigator, Michael Toretta.
Yeah.
And
Michael
helps Drew and Joyce sue the Orlando Police Department so that they could get their hands on all of the files associated with Jen's case.
good.
Yes. So in March of 2019, the Kesses won the legal battle, and OPD had to hand over 16,000 pages of documents and 67 hours of video and audio recordings.
Woo!
So it's not like the investigators and the OPD weren't trying. Like, they were investigating. Clearly 16,000 pages of documents shows that.
That's a lot of
there just was no
and
movement.
67 hours of video and audio. Like, I do think that this is right to hand it over to the family.
Yes, I agree.
You know?
Especially after that amount of time.
Yes.
And Toretta went straight to work, going through everything. And he discovered a tip that came in about 10 months after Jen disappeared, saying that this person saw someone dumping a rolled up piece of carpet into a nearby lake on the same day that Jen went missing. And this tip potentially is more credible because the unit that was across from Jen's was actually having carpet being laid down by the maintenance workers around the same time that she went missing. So he felt like this is something he really had to look into, and it could be a really good lead. And local authorities agreed, like, we'll investigate this. And they spent a few days searching the lake, and they found nothing.
Oh man.
Yeah. So Toretta,
I know you said I'd be frustrated, but I hate this so much.
Yeah, this is a case that, like, I think about a lot because it's just like, unfortunately, everything worked in the suspect's favor in the most infuriating way.
Yeah.
So Toretta changed focus a little bit, and he actually started to really get on the same page with Detective Wright's main theory. They both believed that Jen had begun her day as normal. She took a shower, she picked out her outfit to match her new shoes, she gathered her things, her purse, her briefcase, her phone, Travis's phone, and that she made her way down to her car, at which point she was kidnapped. And they believed that it was even potentially before she got into her car. And this is where that heels comment that you said earlier pinged for me, because since her heels weren't found, you would think she'd get in her car and change her shoes.
Yes.
And so she was still in her heels when she disappeared.
What? Yeah.
So that kind of fits in the fact that they believe that she was kidnapped before she actually got into her car.
Exactly. I was gonna say, like, so that sounds like she did not, in fact, make it into that car.
And Toretta believes that there were potentially many workers living across the hall from Jen, maybe even as many as 10. And he believes it was likely one of them who abducted her. Now, the authorities have come out saying that, like, there were not 10 people living in there, and they're not even sure if there was one person living in there.
Okay.
So this is very much Toretta's theory. There's really no way to say it's impossible. There's no way to say, yes, that is true. But he believes this.
Yeah. It's a theory.
Yeah. And Toretta, through his interviews, discovered that Jen wasn't the only woman living at Mosaic and Millennia who felt uncomfortable with the men working in the complex. He says he spoke to 6 other women who felt incredibly uncomfortable in their own home due to the men that would stare at them and talk about them within earshot. Yeah. I like that. That sounds so terrible to me, where it's like, this is your home. This is where you should feel the most comfortable.
Exactly. And 6 other women are coming forward. Like, these guys were not, they didn't feel safe.
Exactly, yeah. So, jumping ahead a little bit to 2020, new images were released to the public of Jen's car. Drew Kesse describes what we're kind of seeing in this image and what he believes happened based on what we're seeing. He says, quote,
Okay.
"It looked like somebody was thrown down on top of the hood. Arms spread out and dragged back, almost like off the hood, to the point where you can almost see fingers scrambling down the hood." Kelly, I put the picture
Okay.
in here.
I
Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to tell.
Yeah, I waited for his quote to roll down, but it is kind of hard to
You can
tell.
see on the driver's side that it looks like there's a lot less like
Yeah,
dust and dirt, which is what he's referring to. Based on this photo, there's a lot of
yeah.
glare, but you can kind of see some finger marks, and just the fact that there's not as much dirt in that area, it's almost as if what he's saying is
Yeah.
exactly true. Like somebody was kind of pushed onto the hood, and you can see a
Yeah.
couple like
Yeah.
fingerprints.
I just cleaned my laptop screen, and like it does look like there's excess, like it almost looks like dirt, soil, but then that driver's side above the headlight is almost completely clean,
Almost the
and the
headlight
rest of
all
the
the way up to
hood,
the top of the hood. Yeah.
yes, yeah, and the rest of the hood looks normal. Okay, so I see.
Yeah. In an Oxygen article that came out in 2020 that discussed these marks on the hood, they also mentioned that there were witnesses who saw the car pull out at Mosaic at Millennia and that it was driving erratically. Unfortunately, this witness couldn't actually see the driver, but they said that they noticed this car specifically because it caught their attention because it was driving erratically. And I wish I had more. That honestly brings us up to date with what we have. Unfortunately, Jen is still missing. Her family is still fighting every single day to find her. And if you have any information, please contact authorities to bring Jen home and or to identify her abductor. You can call Crimeline at 1-800-423-8477 or the Orlando Police at 407-246-3982. Kelly, what are your thoughts on this case?
Oh man, I you told it really well, and I understand why you think about it a lot, because it's super upsetting that everything worked out for the suspect this way. And she had such a caring family, like so close, that they deserve that closure. Like,
Oh, they do.
and friends who are passing out flyers, like it's something I say a lot on the show, because when people are murdered, you're not just taking them from their family or their friends, you're taking them from their community as well, where they could have done good. She was a financial advisor saving a company millions. Like, she could have been a great member of the community in this condo, and it just it frustrates me, like you told me it would off air.
This case makes me
But
so angry because I feel like we have
yeah,
so much, but at the same time we have nothing. There's no real
yes,
suspects other than the person in those pool surveillance photos. Like there's no names of people.
right.
Chino's not a suspect. There's nothing to actually tie him to this.
Yes, I hate that. They have nothing. He passed the polygraph. But you did tell me off air I would be frustrated, and I am. But I will just say, with my final remark here, that it is something that I'm going to think about that's super disturbing, that there were 6 other women in this condo association who came forward and said that these men made them extremely uncomfortable, and they could hear them talking about them. Like, that is very scary.
Some of them
That's
would
very
say
scary.
that as they would walk by, all of the men would go silent and just like stop and stare. Like that's such an uncomfortable
That's
feeling.
Oh my god. I hate that. And like I said, you told it so well. It's just, I hate every part of it.
I do recommend anyone to go check out jenniferkesse.com. Her family has created this website, and it's fairly bare bones, but it gives you flyers. It gives you all the surveillance photos. They even have something which I think it's such a great idea that they have all of these photos, and they say, like, download them, put them on the background of your computer so that you see them every day, and maybe it'll spark a memory. Like, give yourself some time and put it in front of your face for a while and consistently.
We always say that, like, the smallest thing that you remember or come up with could be something that is huge.
And there's a lot more stuff in this case too that I chose not to really bring up, like her ex-boyfriend Matt, who was in the apartment with Logan while she was gone. He was in the area still, and he was questioned quite a bit. There's been a lot of speculation with him on different, like, online forums, but he's been cleared. Like, he hasn't been involved, but that was, like, a major rabbit hole that a lot of people had gone down in this investigation. There's a lot of other things that just kind of felt like weren't necessarily going to be the answer in this case.
Right.
So for people who want to know more, there's out there.
We know so little, but so much, and, like, so there's no real way to say, like, to do anything but create a rabbit hole where you think about this thing and you get no closer, which sucks. It sucks.
Yeah.
And just like Sam said, please call Crimeline or the Orlando Police if you know anything about Jennifer Kesse.
Yeah, and I will say, if you do want more, like, really in-depth coverage, Crime Weekly does a 3-parter. I know we recommend them a lot, but they just do really great research.
They're great.
But they have, I believe it's a 3-parter that they have on this case. So does True Crime Garage. I think they have a 4-parter on this, where they go even more in depth. I highly recommend them. I desperately want to find answers in this case. I really hope that someday there are answers.
Yeah. It's so close, but so far, and it's one of those cases that we talk about that I just feel like is solvable.
I do too. I think if they can help identify the person in the photos that we have, but the hard thing is, like, Mosaic and Millennia have admitted that they hired a lot of illegal immigrants to do their work, and it can be very difficult to track them down because there's no official paperwork for them. They don't have it.
They probably didn't even take pictures of these guys when they got the jobs.
Yeah, or just have onboarding.
Yeah. Oh, God, I hate this.
Yeah, so hopefully there's answers. But thank you for listening to Have You Heard About This Case? If you liked this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. You can find us on YouTube at Have You Heard About This Case, on Instagram at Have You Heard About This Case Pod, and on TikTok at HYHATC. Or you can email us at haveyouheardaboutThisCase@gmail.com. Thanks, and we'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.